Welcome to This Horror Real.
The second I opened my front door with my phone recording, the guy in the car ducked down behind the dashboard. I just stopped right there on the porch looking across the street at this dark gray sedan sitting under a street light that hadn't worked in forever. The headlights were off, but the car was still running. There was no license plate on the front, and when I stepped farther onto the porch to see the back of the car, there wasn't one there either. I had noticed the same car outside my house 3 nights in a row, always after midnight, always parked in almost the exact same place. Until then, I had been telling myself it belonged to someone visiting a neighbor. But visitors usually got out of their cars. They didn't sit in darkness for hours watching one house. I lifted my phone higher. The driver stayed hidden. I could only see the top of his head above the door. Then the reverse lights came on. The sedan backed away from the curb, turned at the end of the block, and disappeared. I stood there watching until I couldn't hear the engine anymore. When I checked the recording, I noticed something I hadn't seen in person. Before the man ducked, his phone had been raised toward my house. The next night, I stayed awake on purpose. At 12:41 a.m., a pair of headlights moved slowly across my bedroom wall. I looked through a gap in the blinds. The sedan rolled past my driveway, continued another 20 feet, then backed into the same spot across the street. No plates, lights off, engine running. This time I didn't go outside. I turned off every light downstairs and watched from an upstairs window. For almost 40 minutes nothing happened. Then the driver lowered his window. A small red glow appeared near his face. I thought he was smoking until he raised it, and I realized it was a phone screen he was recording. He pointed it toward my driveway, then toward my upstairs windows. Then the car window went back up. At 1:27, my motion camera sent an alert. I expected to see a raccoon or a cat. Instead, the clip showed the sedan's passenger door opening. A second man stepped out, crossed the street, and walked directly toward my house. He stopped at the end of my driveway, stared up at the camera mounted above the garage, then calmly turned around and walked back to the sedan. The sedan left less than a minute later. The following night, I called the police while the car was still parked outside my house. I gave the dispatcher the description, explained the missing plates, and told her 2 men had been watching my house. By the time an officer arrived 23 minutes later, the sedan was gone. I showed him the camera footage. He agreed it was suspicious, especially the missing plates, but neither man had actually entered my property in the video. He asked if I recognized them. I didn't. He asked if I had arguments with anyone, fired an employee, ended a relationship badly, owed anyone money, or had recently sold something online. Again, no. The officer told me to keep my doors locked, save every recording, and call immediately if they returned. Before leaving, he drove around the surrounding streets looking for the sedan. He didn't find it. At 3:14 that morning, after I had finally fallen asleep, my doorbell camera recorded the car passing my house once more. It didn't stop, it just drove by slowly enough for the passenger to lean toward the window and look directly at my front door. The next day, I installed another camera on the side of the house overlooking the wooden gate leading into my backyard. I didn't tell anyone except my brother. That night, the sedan didn't park across the street. For the first time in almost a week, I thought maybe the police cruiser had scared them away. At 1:08 a.m., my new camera detected movement. A man in a dark hoodie appeared at the edge of the image. He walked up to the gate and stopped. He didn't touch it immediately. First, he looked directly at the new camera. Then he stepped backward until his face disappeared beneath the roofline where the camera couldn't see him. A few seconds later, his hand entered the frame and pulled once on the gate latch. Locked. He disappeared. I ran to an upstairs window overlooking the backyard. I couldn't see anyone. Then I heard an engine start behind my house. The sedan had been parked on the next street, completely outside the view of my front cameras. They had changed where they parked the same day I installed the new camera. At sunrise, I inspected the gate. The lock hadn't been damaged, but there was a thin strip of black electrical tape wrapped around part of the latch. I knew I hadn't put it there. When I removed it, I realized the tape had been positioned so the latch couldn't fully settle unless the gate was pushed hard. Someone had been testing whether they could leave it looking closed while keeping it easier to reopen. That afternoon, I replaced the latch with a keyed lock and added a motion light. I also checked every window on the first floor. Behind a small bathroom window, I found something else. A piece of folded cardboard had been pushed into the lower corner of the frame from outside. It was barely visible. When I pulled it out, I understood what it was doing. The cardboard prevented the window from closing completely. The gap was tiny, but the lock couldn't engage. I hadn't opened that window in weeks. Whoever had placed it there had already been close enough to touch my house. 2 nights later, I decided not to wait for the sedan to come to me. At 11:52, it appeared again and parked farther down the block. I got into my car and drove away. I didn't have anywhere to go. I just wanted to know what they would do. For the first 2 turns, nothing happened. Then headlights appeared behind me. The sedan stayed about 6 car lengths back. I turned right. It turned right. I crossed a main road, drove through a neighborhood I never used, and made 3 more turns. It stayed with me. I called 911 on speaker and told the dispatcher I believed the plateless car stalking my house was following me. She directed me toward a 24-hour gas station while an officer headed that way. As soon as I turned onto the brightly lit property, the sedan accelerated past without entering. I didn't get a clear look at the driver. He was wearing a dark baseball cap. The passenger was turned completely sideways in his seat, watching me as they passed. The police took another report, but the sedan disappeared again. The next morning, my neighbor, Mark, walked over carrying his phone. His garage camera faced part of the street, and after hearing what happened, he had gone through several nights of recordings. What he showed me changed everything. The sedan wasn't only coming after midnight. On 3 different mornings, it drove past less than 10 minutes after I left for work. On another day, it appeared 30 minutes before I came home. Whoever was inside knew my schedule well enough to check whether I was there. Mark found one clip from Sunday afternoon showing the sedan stopped at the corner. The passenger was holding something against the windshield. When Mark zoomed in, it looked like a printed sheet of paper. There were dark rectangular shapes across it, photographs. I stared at the screen until I realized one of the shapes looked exactly like the front of my house. They weren't randomly watching the neighborhood. They had brought information about my property with them. I stopped sleeping upstairs. For the next several nights, I stayed on the couch with every downstairs light off and my phone beside me. At 2:16 one morning, the motion light behind the house switched on. My camera notification arrived almost simultaneously. Someone was standing at the back door. I watched the live feed as a gloved hand reached toward the knob. The man didn't knock. He didn't check whether anyone was awake. He simply pressed the handle down slowly. It stopped against the deadbolt. Then he pulled once. I called 911 without taking my eyes off the screen. The man stepped away, but instead of immediately leaving, he moved toward the kitchen window. I heard a faint scrape against the glass from 15 feet away. I shouted that the police were coming. He ran. I rushed to the front window just in time to see the sedan accelerate from the corner with its lights still off. Police arrived within minutes. Behind my kitchen window, they found a small flat screwdriver lying in the mulch. The officers searched the neighborhood but couldn't find the car. One of them suggested checking my vehicle in case the men had placed something on it, I thought that sounded excessive until the officer crouched beside my rear bumper and reached underneath. His hand came back holding a black plastic device slightly larger than a matchbox. It was magnetic, a tracking device. I felt sick looking at it. Suddenly the sedan following me to the gas station made sense. They hadn't needed to keep my car in sight from the beginning. They could see where I was going. The officer bagged the device as evidence and told me not to touch anything else around the property until they had photographed it. I asked how long the tracker might have been there. He couldn't tell me. That meant the men could have known where I worked, where I shopped, when I visited family, and exactly when my car returned home. I had spent more than a week thinking they were learning my routine from the street. They had been carrying my routine around in their pocket. The next afternoon, I remembered something the first officer had asked me, whether I had recently sold anything online. I hadn't, but I had purchased something. 3 weeks earlier, I had ordered a used camera lens through a local marketplace listing. The seller originally offered shipping, but after we realized we lived only 20 minutes apart, he offered to drop it off and save me the cost. I had given him my address. A man arrived in a silver pickup, handed me the lens at the front door, took the cash, and left. Nothing about him had seemed unusual. I opened the Marketplace app and checked the conversation. The seller's profile was gone. When I looked through my doorbell history, the delivery video was still there. I sent a screenshot of the man to the officer handling my reports. Less than an hour later, he called me back. The man in the delivery footage appeared to be the same person captured near my side gate. Then I understood why my house had been selected. During the marketplace conversation, the seller had asked what camera I used because he claimed to be a photographer too. I had answered casually. I told him about the 2 camera bodies I owned, several lenses, my desktop editing setup, and a drone. Thousands of dollars of equipment. I even mentioned that most of it stayed in my home office. When he delivered the lens, the front door had been opened behind me. From the porch, he would have been able to see straight through the living room toward the hallway leading to the office. What I had considered harmless small talk had given a stranger a list of valuable equipment and the address where I kept it. Police began treating the incidents as an attempted targeted burglary rather than simple suspicious activity. They also learned the seller had used a false name on the marketplace account. The phone number connected to it had been prepaid and was already disconnected. For 4 nights after the attempted entry, the sedan vanished. Then, just after 1 a.m. on the 5th night, my doorbell camera sent another vehicle alert. The same gray sedan rolled slowly past the house, still no plates. It stopped 2 houses down. I called police immediately and stayed away from the windows. This time, patrol cars were already nearby. Within 6 minutes, I saw flashing lights wash across my living room ceiling. Officers blocked both ends of the street before the sedan could leave. The driver tried anyway. He backed over a curb, struck a mailbox, and stopped when another cruiser pulled behind him. 2 men were taken out of the car. Neither was the man who had delivered the camera lens to my house. But inside the sedan, police found burglary tools, gloves, several prepaid phones, and printed photographs of multiple homes. Mine was one of them. On the back of the photograph were handwritten notes, my work hours, the location of the office, the backyard gate, and 3 words that bothered me more than anything else: lives there alone. The sedan had been stolen months earlier, and the 2 men arrested in it were eventually connected to several residential burglaries in nearby counties. Police believe they were part of a small group that identified valuable property through online sales, marketplace listings, social media posts, and in-person transactions. The man who delivered my lens appeared to be the person finding targets. He would learn what people own, confirm their addresses, and pass that information to the others. Police had his image and a possible identity, but by the time they searched the address associated with him, he was gone. I replaced every exterior lock, installed window sensors, upgraded the cameras, and stopped using my home address for local purchases. For months, nothing else happened. No sedan, no footsteps at the gate, no hands testing the back door. Eventually, I started sleeping normally again. Then one Saturday morning, I was cleaning beneath the desk in my home office when I noticed a tiny scrape on the outside edge of the window frame. I went outside to check it. Wedged beneath the bottom trim was another small piece of folded cardboard. I couldn't tell how long it had been there. The police had photographs of the third man, his messages, and enough information to know what he had been doing, but as far as I was ever told, they never found him. That is the part I still think about. The two men in the sedan were caught. The stolen car was recovered. I finally learned why a car with no plates had been parking outside my house every night. Because the person who first stood on my porch, looked through my open front door, listened while I described everything valuable inside my house, and then apparently chose me as a target, was still somewhere else. Every now and then, when a car slows down near my house after midnight, I still check for a license plate before I look at the driver. If you had noticed that sedan outside your house night after night, tell me in the comments what you would have done. And if you've ever had something happen that felt harmless at first but became terrifying once you understood what was really happening, share your experience below. Like the video, subscribe to This Horror Reel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another This Horror Reel story, because sometimes the most frightening part isn't realizing someone has been watching your house. It's realizing they may have already been inside your life long before you noticed them.